All right, let's get into it. Today we're exploring a pretty cool story. The story of how Geneva became independent.
It's one of those stories you think you know,
Yeah.
but then when you really dig into it,
Mhm.
it's so much more complex.
Yeah. Well, especially for this deep dive, we're looking at
Right.
Chazalon RCG Independence Reform.pdf,
Oh,
which,
yes.
if you haven't heard of it, it's an analysis of Geneva's council records right around the time of the Reformation.
Fascinating, curious.
A fascinating period, a lot going on.
Absolutely.
And, when you think about Geneva today,
Mm-hmm.
you think of it as this peaceful international city.
Right. A hub
A-
for
a-
diplomacy.
But getting to independence was anything but peaceful.
Oh, yeah.
It was, there's a lot of political maneuvering,
For sure.
religious upheaval,
Uh-huh.
and even some creative financial solutions, I think we could say.
Indeed, yeah. It's a multi-stage process. It's not
Yeah.
just one thing. You can look at the transfer of civil justice, the bishop's departure, the quote-unquote usurpation of regal rights,
Right.
and of course, the impact of the Reformation,
Right.
all intertwined to shape this independence movement.
So it's not quite as simple as just like, okay, we're going to get rid of the bishop and we're independent.
It would be nice.
Let's have a party.
Yeah, simple.
Yeah.
It wasn't quite like that.
Okay, so what's one of the big misconceptions that you see about this story?
I think a big one is that
Yeah.
Genevans just chased their bishop out and
Okay.
declared independence.
Mm-hmm.
But these council records tell a different story,
Okay, all right.
much more intricate.
So let's break it down a little bit. What actually happened with this bishop?
So the bishop, Pierre de Lebaume, he leaves Geneva in 1533.
Okay.
And there was pressure, for sure, from reformers.
Yeah.
Tensions were high, But here's the thing.
Yeah.
He fully intended to come back.
Oh.
He wasn't thinking this was permanent.
Right.
And the Genevans, they were working within the existing systems, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Trying to keep things stable.
Mm-hmm. So what changed? What made it that he never came back?
Well, ironically, his own actions.
Oh.
He allies with the Duke of Savoy.
Oh. Okay.
Savoy, as you know, had his own eye on Geneva.
Right, right.
So to the Genevans, this looks like a betrayal.
Totally.
Like he's siding with the enemy.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what made his return impossible.
Wow. So it's like he kind of played right into the...
Sure did.
Yeah, maybe unintentionally, but he did.
Wow. Okay, so even though he was gone, though, there's still the pressure from Savoy.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
Savoy sees this power vacuum as an opportunity
Okay.
and decides to impose a blockade on Geneva,
Oh, wow.
trying to bring them to their knees,
Where's
essentially.
to squeeze him?
Yeah, and that's when things take a really fascinating turn, especially when you look at it from a financial perspective.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the minting of coins comes in, right?
Yes, exactly.
Just seems like a pretty bold move.
It was bold, but also born of necessity.
Yeah.
The blockade had crippled their economy.
Right.
Funds were depleted, and they needed a solution.
Okay.
And this was it.
So they're minting their own coins.
Mm-hmm.
I get the symbolic importance of that,
Yeah.
but was it even legal for them to do that at the time?
Well, it definitely challenged the powers that be.
Okay.
Minting coins was considered a regal right, something reserved for kings or emperors.
Sure, sure.
But in Geneva's case,
Yeah.
the situation was a bit nuanced because
Ah.
over a century earlier, the bishops had actually given control of coinage to the Duke of Savoy.
Oh, interesting.
So it wasn't a right that the bishop was actively using.
Right.
It was more like a lost privilege
Oh, I see.
that they were reclaiming.
Okay.
And they did it in a really clever way.
How so?
They melted down confiscated church treasure.
Oh.
So not only did they get the raw material for their new coins,
Yeah.
but it also sent a powerful message.
Right.
Geneva was breaking away from the old order,
Right.
both politically
Yeah.
and financially.
So it wasn't just like we happen to have some extra metal laying around. It was like
very symbolic.
very intentional.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It established their autonomy in a very real way.
Okay, and all this time, this is all happening while the Reformation is kind of bubbling up in the background?
Right, exactly.
So I can't imagine that didn't have some sort of impact on things?
It's all connected.
Yeah.
The Reformation is deeply intertwined with Geneva's fight for independence.
Right.
In fact, May 21st, 1536 is often cited as the date for both.
Oh, wow.
The Reformation's adoption and Geneva's freedom.
Okay.
But like everything else we've been talking about, the
Yeah.
reality is way more complicated than just one date.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure it's not quite as simple as
Well,
everybody just woke up and
yeah.
said, hey, it's Reformation Day and also Independence Day. Let's
Yeah.
party.
2 for 1.
Yeah, exactly.
So, not quite.
Okay, so what does this historical analysis tell us about the Reformation's role in all this?
Well, it wasn't like a sudden overnight conversion, you know? It
Ah,
was more gradual. There
right.
were internal debates, shifting allegiances,
Yeah.
and even some dramatic events that ultimately pushed Geneva towards embracing the Reformation.
Oh, okay. So, like, what kind of events are we talking?
Well, for example, there was the Dispute de Rive.
What's that?
Picture this: a public debate held on the banks of the Rhone River
Okay.
with Catholic priests and Protestant reformers going head to head,
Oh, wow.
arguing about religious doctrine.
So a little more exciting than your
Oh,
average Sunday service.
definitely. It
Yeah.
was quite a spectacle,
I bet.
and it really stirred things up.
Yeah.
This dispute de Rive ignited passions on both sides,
Mm.
and things escalated quickly.
Oh, no.
There are accounts of iconoclasm, destruction of religious images,
Oh, wow.
which heightened tensions and further destabilized the city.
So amidst all this chaos, and with the bishop gone,
Right.
did the Genevan leadership just kind of say, all right, let's just go all in on the Reformation?
Not quite that straightforward, no.
Okay.
The council definitely leaned towards the reformers,
Right.
but initially they tried to keep a balance,
Okay.
appease both Catholics and Protestants.
Mm-hmm.
They even suspended Mass for a while, hoping to calm things
To
down.
buy themselves some time.
Exactly.
Okay, but that obviously didn't last.
Right.
So what was it that tipped the scales in favor of the Reformation?
Well, it was a bunch of factors coming together, really.
Okay.
The bishop leaving was a big obstacle removed,
Right.
and more influential people in Geneva
Yeah.
were openly supporting the Reformation.
Mhm.
And as more Catholic figures,
Right.
clergy and nobles chose to leave the city,
Right.
the momentum shifted decisively toward the reformers.
So it wasn't like a revolution so much as
Like a gradual shift.
a gradual tide. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And all this, remember, was happening against the backdrop of intense political maneuvering.
Oh, right.
Geneva wasn't operating in a vacuum.
Yeah, with all the other big players.
Right.
Okay, well, let's talk about those big players then.
Okay.
So Bern,
Yes.
France,
Mm-hmm.
and the Holy Roman Empire
Uh-huh.
all have kind of a vested interest in what's happening in Geneva.
Absolutely.
So I imagine that was a very...
It was a delicate balancing act for Geneva
Yeah.
to navigate all of that.
And kind of. I mean, how do you come out on top in that situation?
By playing their cards, right?
Yeah.
The historical analysis suggests that they used the competing interests of these powers
Uh-huh.
to their advantage.
Smart.
They formed alliances,
Yeah.
played hard to get,
Right.
really used every tool in their diplomatic toolbox
Wow. So they're really using all their political savvy.
to kind of survive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so are there any like particularly interesting details in the council records that
Let me think. Well, there's mention of secret negotiations between French and Bernese officials
ooh, juicy?
that seem to have had a big impact on Geneva's fate.
Oh, okay.
It looks like both powers wanted control of the city,
Mm,
but ultimately they reached a balance of power.
Yeah.
Maybe some backroom deals were made.
yeah, right.
We don't know for sure,
So knows.
but the details remain a mystery.
Okay, so we have this Geneva breaking free from the Catholic Church,
Yeah.
maneuvering between these powerful allies.
Mm-hmm.
They're minting their own coins.
Right.
So it seems like they're well on their way to becoming a full-fledged republic, right?
Well, not quite.
Yeah.
And this is where we have to clear up another common misconception.
Okay.
So even though Geneva separated from the Catholic Church and
Yeah.
gained a lot of independence,
Right.
technically they were still part of the Holy Roman Empire.
Yeah. Okay, wait. So they're independent,
It's a bit.
but not really.
Yeah.
How does that work?
It's a historical quirk, I guess you could say.
Okay.
The term seigneury or lordship
Okay.
is actually more accurate than republic for Geneva at this time.
Interesting.
They had their own council. They controlled their own affairs,
Right.
but they weren't fully sovereign.
Ice.
Not in the modern sense of the word.
Okay, so I think I'm getting the picture here.
Yeah,
Geneva's independence was not a straight line.
not at all.
It was messy and complicated,
For sure.
but they really made it work.
They did.
They made compromises, built alliances, and played the game of power to get what they wanted.
That's exactly right.
It's a far cry from the way we usually romanticize revolutions.
It's real history, you know?
Oh, yeah.
It's messy
Yeah.
and complicated.
It's not as simple as the history books
If you
sometimes make it seem.
Right. And it's those compromises and those alliances that really shaped this unique independence they achieved.
Yeah, they defied expectations,
They did.
challenged the status quo,
Mm-hmm.
and created a place for themselves
Absolutely.
on the world stage.
Don't forget all of this.
Right.
While they're doing all this, they're also dealing with
Yeah.
the pressures from outside forces.
Right. Like, we can't forget about Bern in France and the Holy Roman Empire.
That's like all those players.
All those big players.
all had a stake in what was happening in Geneva.
So I imagine that would...
Oh, it was a high stakes game
Yeah.
of diplomacy.
Oh, yeah.
With Geneva trying to, to survive
Right.
amongst these bigger powers.
Yeah. They're trying to secure their own interests
Exactly.
while everybody else is also trying to get a piece.
Bernayne, being Protestant,
Right.
saw an opportunity to spread their influence.
Yeah.
King Francis I of France
Mm-hmm.
wanted Geneva for its strategic location.
Of course. Yeah.
And then you had the Holy Roman Empire,
Right.
which technically Geneva was still part of. Right.
So, yeah, they were walking a tightrope.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it sounds like they're playing
Gee.
three-dimensional chess or something.
Right. And so how did they manage to come out on top?
Yeah, how do you even survive that?
Well, it seems like they played it really smart.
Oh, okay.
The historical analysis suggests
Mm-hmm.
that they leveraged these competing interests
Okay.
against each other.
Yeah.
Formed alliances when they needed to,
Mm-hmm.
played hard to get sometimes.
Right.
They were shrewd.
Wow.
They knew how to play the game.
Okay, so are there any specific details in the council records about how they managed to do that?
Well, there's a mention of secret negotiations
Oh,
between French and Bernese officials.
okay.
That probably had a big impact on what happened.
Wow.
Both powers wanted to control the city,
Right.
but somehow they came to this balance of power.
Yeah, I'm sure there were some
Yeah, maybe some...
deals made behind closed doors. Right, backroom deals.
Yeah, exactly.
The details are lost to history.
Lost to history, huh?
Okay.
Okay, so we have Geneva breaking free from the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
They're navigating between all these powerful allies.
Right.
They're even minting their own coins.
Yes.
So it really seems like they are on the road to becoming like a full-fledged republic.
Well, not so fast.
Oh.
And this is where it gets kind of tricky because, they did break away from the church and
Right.
they gained a lot of independence for sure.
Yeah.
But technically, they were still a part of the Holy Roman Empire.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's one of those little historical quirks.
So they're independent,
It's like,
but not really?
yeah, kind of.
I mean, how does that even work?
Yeah, so it's
Okay.
the term seigneurie or lordship actually is more accurate
Then republic.
than a republic, yeah.
Okay.
They had their council.
Mm-hmm.
They controlled their own affairs, but they weren't like a fully sovereign state.
I see.
Not in the way we think of it today.
So this whole thing it wasn't just about breaking free.
Yeah.
It was about
It was about figuring out.
figuring out how to operate
Mhm.
in this very complicated system.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So their independence was really shaped by those compromises,
But
those
yes,
alliances.
It was a unique form of independence.
It's so interesting. It's like
Hmm.
they lost their bishop.
Yeah,
They had this blockade.
right.
They were caught between these empires,
Mm-hmm.
and yet they emerged.
And somehow,
They came out stronger, yeah.
and with a clearer sense of who they were.
It's pretty remarkable, isn't it?
It really is.
And what's even more interesting
Yeah.
is that this wasn't just a temporary thing.
Uh-huh.
This struggle, it seems to have really shaped their identity.
Oh, wow.
It influenced their institutions,
Mm-hmm.
their culture,
Yeah.
their whole approach to the world. It's almost like that struggle kind of baked in,
Yeah, I think so.
this resilience to them,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting when you think about Geneva today as this center for diplomacy and international cooperation.
It's
You almost see the connection,
yeah, there's a through line there.
between the city that had to maneuver between these powerful neighbors
Mm-hmm.
to the city that's now a place where nations come together to solve problems.
It's pretty amazing.
It is. It is.
And that's maybe the most fascinating part of this whole story.
Yeah.
Their path to independence.
Mhm.
It wasn't just about breaking away.
Okay.
It was about finding a way to thrive
Yeah.
in a complex world.
Right, where everything's connected.
Exactly. And they understood that,
Yeah.
that real strength comes from working together, from finding common ground, from building those bridges,
right.
not walls.
So it really makes you think about independence in a different way.
In a whole new light. Yeah.
And it's not always black and white. It's not always.
It's nuanced. It's about finding your place in the world.
Yeah, and working with what you got and the people around you to get where you need to be.
Absolutely.
I love it.
It's a really inspiring story, I think.
It is, yeah. It's like...
they took what could have been a defeat and turned it into a victory.
Yeah, it's like they were dealt this hand, and they played it masterfully.
They did.
Yeah.
They did.
Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into Geneva's independence, I think it's pretty clear that it was a process.
It was a journey.
Journey?
Not a single event.
And it's still shaping Geneva's identity today.
For sure.
Centuries later.
Absolutely. And for you, our listener, the question is, how do you think this unique story of independence continues to influence Geneva's role in the world today?
Yeah, it's something to think about as you explore history.
And the world around you.
Yeah.
Always more to discover.
Always more to discover, that's for sure.
That's right.
All right, well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Geneva's independence.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Yeah, it really makes you think about all the different ways independence can look,
It's not always so clear-cut.
Not at all.
And that's what's so interesting about Geneva.
Yeah.
They weren't just fighting to get rid of one specific ruler.
Right.
It was bigger than that. It was about controlling their own destiny,
Right, like figuring out their own path
Exactly.
in this, ever-changing world.
It's pretty inspiring.
Yeah, it really is. And they did it by, sticking to their ideals, but also, being willing to adapt and make compromises.
Right, playing the long game.
Yeah.
That's real history, not the romanticized versions we sometimes hear.
Totally. Yeah, it's a lot messier than that.
Way messier.
It's amazing how they turned what could have been a total loss into something really unique.
I know, right?
They lost their bishop. They were blockaded. They were caught between these huge empires.
It's like, how did they even survive?
I know.
Yeah.
And they came out of it even stronger than before.
Yeah, with a clearer sense of who they were.
It's remarkable.
And what's fascinating is that this wasn't just a temporary thing.
Right.
This whole experience really seems to have, shaped their identity.
Interesting.
It changed their institutions, their culture, even the way they interacted with the rest of the world.
Yeah, when you think about Geneva today as this hub for global diplomacy and humanitarian work,
right,
you can see those echoes.
Right, for sure.
It's like the same skills they used to navigate between powerful neighbors back then are now being used to solve global problems.
That's a really cool way to look at it.
Isn't it? And it kind of shows that their independence wasn't just about breaking free.
Right.
It was about figuring out how to thrive in a world where everything's connected.
Exactly. They understood that real strength comes from working together.
Collaborating, yeah.
To building bridges.
Yeah, instead of just trying to go it alone.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Geneva's independence, I think the biggest takeaway is that it wasn't just a single moment in time.
Right.
It was a journey, a process that unfolded over years.
Full of twists and turns.
Exactly. And it's a journey that still shapes who they are today.
For sure.
And for you, our listener, I think the question is, how do you think this story, this unique path to independence, continues to influence Geneva's role in the world?
It's something to think about.
Yeah, something to ponder.
As you continue to explore history and really just the world around you.
Yeah, because there's always more to discover.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Geneva's independence. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time.
See you then.